this is a criminal presidency, specifically because we cannot see this presidency as just more politics. This is not just more politics. What we are watching has nothing to do with politics. This has to do with criminal violations. If President Obama were in the private sector, he would be in prison, Eric Holzer would be in prison, Kathleen Sebelius would be in prison, Lois Lerner would be in prison, everybody who is working at the ATF during Fast and Furious would be in prison. All of these folks would be in prison. The safest place to be a criminal in American society today is in the government. That is the safest place to be a criminal. If you're looking to steal from somebody, if you're looking to harm somebody, if you're looking to kill somebody, if you're looking to leave 4 people without guns in a terrorist part of the world and watch them die, the safest place to do that and then run for president is in the government. So here are just a few of the crimes that this administration has pursued in furtherance of its goal, which is, of course, to destroy the Constitution and to destroy the American system as we know it. And this all sounds alarmist. To folks on the left, they say, oh, this is alarmist stuff. The president can't do anything that he wants. Well, then why are you arguing for him to be able to do anything that he wants? I mean, really, what exactly have you heard folks on the left say? You know, the president has gone too far this time. Anything? Will they ever say that? Of course not. George W. Bush went too far because he was on the other side of the aisle. But President Obama, he can never go far enough. And in fact, we should work to ensure that he continues to go further. The president made an amazing statement the other day. The president of the United States actually said the other day, he was talking about the intransigence, the supposed intransigence of Congress. And he said, you know, Congress won't work with me. I will continue to act to do whatever is necessary. He said, and if the Republicans don't like it, if they don't like it, they can join me. So these are the two choices in America right now. Bow to the dictatorship or bow to the dictatorship. Right? These are the two choices. So here are just some of the crimes that this administration has taken part in. Espionage. Right? You're not allowed to give money or guns to terrorist groups. Ask Hamas how that's working out for them. Because the President of the United States continues to sign $440 million worth of money over to the Palestinian Authority unity government, which includes Hamas and Islamic Jihad, State Department-sponsored terrorist organizations. And the State Department has sided with Hamas, with the Palestinian Authority, with Islamic Jihad, called on Israel for restraint against terrorist groups that kidnap young Jewish boys and then proceed to murder them. They're doing this now on the basis of this Palestinian kid who tragically was killed by Jewish extremists. There is a vast difference between the two sides. There are no streets going to be named after these Jewish pathetic pieces of human refuse who engaged in this conduct. They're going to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Every Jew who watched what happened on Sunday when this arrest took place and all this came out felt sick to his stomach. They felt like vomiting and never stopped vomiting. That was not true on the other side. When these 3 Jewish boys were killed, Hamas was celebrating. They ran ads in their newspapers showing these 3 Jewish boys as dead rats. Okay, there is a vast difference between the two sides, but of course this administration, this administration is not interested in any way in cracking down on terrorism. They're interested in funding terrorism. We've now reversed sides in the war on terror. Everybody who we were fighting has at one point or another received American money or guns, including ISIS, right, who are now fighting in Iraq. And both sides of that we're now funding. Right? Iran, we've relieved the sanctions on, so they're taking over the southern half of Iraq, and ISIS is taking over the northern half of Iraq because we funded their allies in the war against Bashar Assad, who, it turns out, we're now going to fund to fight ISIS. So we are now on every side of every issue except the right side, which in that arena of the world is Israel and Israel alone. And that's espionage. And it's a violation of the Arms Export Control Act to boot. The Arms Export Control Act suggests I cannot funnel, if I were to funnel a gun to ISIS, I'd be arrested. If President Obama does it, that's just American foreign policy. Involuntary manslaughter, right? The basic case of involuntary manslaughter, I'm a lawyer, so the basic case for involuntary manslaughter is a 3-pronged test, right? Somebody died, number 1. Somebody died as a result of reckless action, number 2. Number 3, the person who took that reckless action knew it was reckless and could result in death at the time. Okay, those are the 3 elements of involuntary manslaughter. Benghazi, anyone? Leaving no security anywhere in the vicinity, in an area where we were running guns to Syria through Turkey. In an area where the New York Times had reported literally the year before that the entire town was run by Ansar al-Sharia. And surprise, surprise, Ansar al-Sharia was behind the terrorist attack that killed Chris Stevens and 3 other Americans. Right? Who's responsible for that? Hillary Clinton's responsible for that. She's guilty of involuntary manslaughter. She shouldn't be worried about whether she goes to the White House. She should be worried about whether she goes to the big house. Unfortunately, we have an attorney general who would never prosecute anyone for these sorts of violations because he too is a criminal and he too is guilty of involuntary manslaughter, as it turns out. He greenlit the Fast and Furious program. Turns out that, You might think that running guns to Mexican drug cartels, with no tags in them, by the way, there were no electronic monitors on these guns. It was widely known inside ATF that when you run guns to the Mexican drug cartels, the only place they're going to show up so that we can back-channel them, backtrack them, and figure out where they were is at crime scenes. This was explicitly known at the ATF at the time. You might think that's reckless. You might think that that might result in homicide, like the killing of a Border Patrol agent, perhaps. And you might be the head of the DOJ. And if you were involved in this, you were probably promoted. Because nobody who's responsible for Fast and Furious has gone to jail. Nobody's really even been fired. How about violation of internal revenue laws? If you or I were to leverage the IRS to crack down on particular folks, we would be put in jail. That's a violation of the Internal Revenue Code itself, 26 U.S. Code 7212 for people who are following. It's also a violation for politicians and for politically motivated bureaucrats to get involved, and this is a violation of the Hatch Act. Right? The Hatch Act prohibits bureaucrats from getting involved in political situations like this and targeting political opponents. It's a violation of law. But it's a phony scandal, according to the President of the United States. You want to know how corrupt and criminal and nasty this administration is? John Eastman runs the National Organization for Marriage. I'm sure some of you know of John. John's National Organization for Marriage is obviously a pro-traditional marriage organization. This administration is anti-traditional marriage, and so the IRS leaked the confidential tax information, including donor information, about the National Organization for Marriage, which is a 501c3, which means their donors are confidential. They leaked their entire donor list to the Human Rights Campaign, which is a gay advocacy group. Now, they used a middleman in order to do this. John's group, National Organization for Marriage, sued the IRS. The IRS acknowledged that they had, in fact, leaked this material and signed over $50,000 of your tax dollars to the National Organization for Marriage. Now, what John did is John said, okay, fine. You know, we'd like to find out who particularly at the IRS did this. Let's trace this back up the chain. Who decided that it would be a great idea to hand over confidential tax information to political opponents? Right? Who decided that that would be a great idea? So they said to Eric Holder, why don't you prosecute the middleman, right, who had received the confidential tax information and distributed it in violation of law? Why don't you prosecute him? Eric Holder said, no one will be prosecuted for this. No one will be prosecuted for this. So John said, okay, fine. You're not going to prosecute him. Give him immunity. Because this guy was pleading the fifth. You can only plead the fifth if there is a threat of criminal prosecution. Right? You can't plead the fifth. If you come to me and you ask me if I was cheating on my wife, I can't just say I plead the fifth. That has no relevance. You're not threatening to criminally prosecute me. The Fifth Amendment is only available in situations in which you do not have immunity. So John said to Eric Holder, go ahead, give this guy immunity, then we can sue the IRS, we can subpoena him, and we can force him to answer questions about where he got this material. And Eric Holder said, I will not give him immunity. So in other words, he won't prosecute the guy to get the information, and he won't get immunity. He won't give immunity so the guy would give up the information. This is the height of criminality, and it's so blatant. And yet, has anybody outside this room ever heard of the National Organization for Marriage? Can you imagine if the NAACP had sued Bush's IRS, and Bush's IRS had said, yeah, you know what, we discriminated against you, here's a $50,000 settlement. You think that might lead the news for a few nights? But for the Obama administration, it will not even make the back page of the New York Times. How about unauthorized disclosure of information? You're not allowed to leak confidential national security information, and yet this administration has done that repeatedly. This administration has done it 4 separate times with regard to Israeli national security information, sunk Israel's ability to strike Iran. Israel was supposed to use an airbase in Azerbaijan to strike Iran. That was leaked by the Defense Department to the New York Times. Israel was supposed to work with the Saudis to use Saudi airspace to strike Iran. That was leaked by the Defense Department to the New York Times. Israel was behind Stuxnet. That was leaked by the Defense Department to the Washington Post. And Israel was working out agreements with particular groups to go in and try and decapitate some of the heads of the nuclear program. That was also leaked by the Defense Department to the Washington Post. But it's not just Israeli national security information that's being leaked. You know how we all knew that President Obama had his kill list? You know, Rand Paul has been very big on President Obama has his kill list. American citizens abroad who he just decides we can kill. Which, by the way, is, regardless of what you think of the killing of Anwar al-Awlaki, and I'm fine with it, he's a terrorist, he deserved to die, the possibility that we now live in a country where the president can determine, based on which side of the bed he woke up this morning, whether to hit somebody with a drone or trade them for 5 Taliban terrorists is frightening. That should be frightening. Bo Bergdahl was no friend to the United States, according to most reports. And yet he was an American citizen who had to be brought home just in time for the president to quash the VA scandal. He had to be brought home at the cost of 5 top Taliban officials. because he was an American citizen. He had to be brought home. Well, if his name happened to be Anwar, he'd be dead from a drone strike in Yemen. So the president literally, I mean, that is, if there's anything that speaks to dictatorial power, it is the ability of the president to unilaterally declare who is an American citizen and who is not an American citizen for the purposes of hitting them with a drone or trading terrorists for them. Deprivation of rights under color of law. The fact is that what the Obama administration has done as far as the mining of metadata, and I'm a hawk on national security, is far beyond the scope of the Patriot Act. Far beyond the scope of the Patriot Act. Representative Sensenbrenner has said as much. Right? Sensenbrenner, who wrote the Patriot Act, said if I had ever conceived that the Patriot Act would be this widely applied by the President of the United States to be checking our Gmails and our Gchats and our metadata on our phones, I never would have signed off on the thing. This is a violation of our rights under color of law. Bribery, obviously, is rampant within this administration. The president has paid off unions. The president has paid off various political allies with ambassadorships. He's paid them off with cash to their companies. I mean, some of the statistics on bribery from this administration are just stunning. Overall, the Washington Post has reported $3.9 billion in federal grants and financing flow to 21 companies backed by firms with connections to 5 Obama administration staffers and advisors, according to Peter Schweitzer. The Obama administration's $20 billion in green technology loans contained $16 billion. So 4 out of $5 for the green technology loans went to companies related to President Obama or his cronies. Bribery is rampant within this administration. And then, of course, there's obstruction of justice, in which the federal government gets involved in cases it has no business in. Cases like, for example, the George Zimmerman case in Florida, in which the DOJ inserted its thumb on the scales of justice and attempted to convict George Zimmerman before the evidence was even in, or the case of Gerald Walpin, the Inspector General, who was fired when he investigated President Obama's friend in Sacramento, the mayor, Kevin Johnson. He was fired unceremoniously, or the case of the new Black Panthers, in which the Department of Justice decided just wasn't worthwhile checking out people waving batons outside of polling places because they happen to be black, but if you want to check an ID of a black person, then you're a racist. So, what we have here, obviously at this point, is a criminal administration. We're seeing it every day. The only problem with the book is I had to stop writing it at some point. What we're watching on the southern border, obviously, is, in my opinion, the single most grave threat to national security that we have seen over the course of this presidency, and that's saying a hell of a lot considering we have a president who just surrendered Iraq to terrorists, has put Israel in mortal danger, and has signed a nuclear deal with Iran. But what we are watching on our southern border is a threat to the very existence of the United States, and it is specifically, there are people who are out there, folks on the left. It's incredible, the skewed view of folks on the left. Truly astonishing. Somebody wrote a column at USA Today saying, is this Obama's Katrina? Is this Obama's Katrina? No, it's not Obama's Katrina. That was a hurricane. That was an act of God. It just shows the hatred for President Bush on folks on the left. It is not even wildly comparable. In your worst imagination, it's not comparable. President Obama created this hurricane. The year before Obama took office, there were 6,000 illegal immigrant minors who attempted to cross the border. This year, there are going to be close to 100,000. That doesn't just magically happen. President Obama, who's going out there now saying, well, I didn't incentivize, I don't know where are they getting this crazy idea? Where are they getting this insane idea? That they should come across the border. And they're getting this crazy idea from the fact that the President of the United States has vowed not to deport anyone between the ages of 16 and 30 in the country illegally, from the fact that the President of the United States sued the state of Arizona for enforcing federal immigration law, and from the fact that the President of the United States has stood behind every effort by major cities, including Los Angeles, to become sanctuary cities.